There is a role that many people adopt early in life, often without conscious choice. It is the role of the good one, the reliable child, the peacemaker, the one who never causes trouble, who always meets expectations, who sacrifices their own needs for the sake of others. This role brings rewards. It earns approval, love, security. It makes life predictable and safe. But beneath this carefully constructed identity, something else is happening. Something is being sacrificed. Something is being denied. And that denied part does not simply disappear. It waits in the shadows, accumulating energy, until one day it can no longer be contained. The person who has been the good one for decades suddenly finds themselves filled with inexplicable rage, or they collapse into depression for no apparent reason, or they sabotage their own success just as they are about to achieve what they have worked toward their entire lives, and they cannot understand why. They have done everything right. They have been good. They have followed the rules, and yet something within them is destroying what they have built. This is not random. This is not bad luck. This is the hidden cost of being the good one finally coming due. When we speak of being the good one, we must understand what this means psychologically. It means that the individual has identified completely with one aspect of themselves, the aspect that conforms to external expectations, and has rejected everything that does not conform. It means that a profound split has occurred in the psyche, a division between the acceptable self and the unacceptable self. The acceptable self becomes the persona, the mask that is shown to the world. The unacceptable self becomes the shadow, the repository of everything that has been denied. Now, every human being develops a persona to some degree. This is necessary for social functioning. We cannot be completely transparent in all situations. We adapt our behavior to fit different contexts. We learn which parts of ourselves are welcomed and which are not. This is normal and healthy. But for the person who becomes the good one, this process goes too far. The persona becomes so dominant, so rigid, so all-encompassing, that the individual loses contact with their authentic self entirely. They become the mask. They forget that there is anything beneath it. Let us consider how this pattern begins. Usually, it originates in childhood, in a family system that cannot tolerate certain expressions of the child's nature. Perhaps the parents are overwhelmed, struggling with their own problems, and they need the child to be easy, compliant, undemanding. Perhaps there is chaos in the home, and the child learns that being good is the only way to create some sense of order and safety. Perhaps there is conditional love, where affection is given only when the child meets certain standards of behavior. Perhaps there is a sibling who is troubled or demanding, and the family needs one child, to be the easy one, the one who does not add to the burden. The child who is utterly dependent on the parents for survival and love learns quickly what is required. They learn to suppress their own needs. They learn to manage the emotions of others. They learn to be responsible beyond their years. They learn that their value lies not in who they are, but in what they do for others. And this learning becomes deeply embedded in the psyche. It becomes the foundation of their identity. They become the good one, and this role feels like their true self, even though it is actually a construction, a defense against the terror of not being loved. What happens to all the parts of the child that do not fit this role? What happens to their anger when they are mistreated? What happens to their sadness when they are neglected? What happens to their desires when they are told those desires are selfish? What happens to their spontaneity, their playfulness, their wildness, their need for attention and care? All of this goes into the shadow. It is repressed, denied, split off from consciousness. The child cannot afford to acknowledge these parts of themselves because to do so would threaten the only strategy they have for maintaining connection and safety. And so the good child grows into the good adult, carrying this pattern forward into all their relationships and roles. They become the employee who never says no, who takes on more than their share of work, who stays late, who never complains. They become the friend who is always available, always supportive, always putting others first. They become the partner who accommodates, who avoids conflict, who sacrifices their own needs for the sake of harmony. They become the parent who is endlessly patient, endlessly giving, endlessly self-sacrificing. On the surface, this looks admirable. These are the people we rely on. These are the people we praise. They are responsible. They are kind. They are selfless. But if we look more closely, if we examine what is happening beneath the surface, we see something quite different. We see a person who is living a half-life. We see someone who has abandoned themselves in order to be loved by others. We see someone who is performing goodness rather than choosing it freely. And we see a shadow that is growing larger and more dangerous with each passing year. The shadow of the good one contains everything that goodness rejects. It contains anger, the healthy anger that says, "This is not acceptable. I will not tolerate this. I have needs and they matter." It contains selfishness, the healthy selfishness that says, "I am allowed to want things for myself. I am allowed to pursue my own happiness. I'm allowed to take up space in the world." It contains aggression, the healthy aggression that provides energy and assertiveness and the capacity to fight for what matters. It contains sexuality, the healthy sexuality that seeks pleasure and connection and aliveness. It contains sadness, the healthy sadness that grieves losses and acknowledges pain. It contains the capacity to disappoint others, to say no, to prioritize oneself, to be imperfect, to be human. All of this is human. All of this is necessary. All of this is part of a whole and functional psyche. But the good one cannot acknowledge any of it without threatening their identity. And so it remains in the shadow, where it does not simply sit passively. It seeks expression. It pushes against the boundaries of consciousness. It leaks out in indirect ways. The person who is always patient suddenly becomes passive-aggressive. The person who never complains develops chronic illness. The person who is always selfless becomes secretly resentful. The person who never expresses anger becomes depressed, which is often anger turned inward. The person who is always responsible suddenly acts out in shocking ways, having an affair, making a reckless decision, destroying what they have carefully built. The person who is always accommodating becomes controlling in subtle ways, managing others through guilt or martyrdom. These eruptions are not character flaws. They are the psyche's attempt to restore balance. They are the shadow demanding to be acknowledged. They are the unconscious saying, "You cannot live this way indefinitely. You cannot be only one thing. You must integrate what you have rejected, or it will destroy you." Let me give you a specific example. Consider a woman who has been the good daughter, the good student, the good wife, the good mother. She has never caused trouble. She has always met expectations. She has built a life that looks successful from the outside. Her home is orderly. Her children are well behaved. Her marriage appears stable. She volunteers at the school. She helps her aging parents. She is always the one people turn to in times of need. Everyone considers her wonderful. But inside, she feels hollow. She feels as though she is going through the motions. She feels disconnected from herself and from others, even though she is always in service to others. She cannot remember the last time she did something purely because she wanted to. She cannot remember the last time she expressed an authentic emotion. She cannot remember the last time she felt truly alive rather than merely functional. She begins to experience symptoms, perhaps anxiety that comes from nowhere, perhaps insomnia, lying awake at 3 a.m. with her mind racing but unable to name what she is worried about. Perhaps a vague but persistent feeling that something is wrong, though she cannot articulate what. Perhaps she develops physical symptoms, headaches or digestive problems or chronic pain that has no clear medical cause. She goes to doctors. They find nothing physically wrong, or they offer diagnoses that do not fully explain what she is experiencing. She tries to push through, to maintain her routines, to keep being the good one. But the symptoms intensify. The anxiety becomes panic attacks. The insomnia becomes debilitating. The vague unease becomes unbearable. And finally, something breaks. Perhaps she has a breakdown that forces her to stop. Perhaps she finds herself weeping uncontrollably and cannot stop. Perhaps she simply cannot get out of bed one morning, cannot face another day of performing the role that has consumed her entire life. Perhaps she does something completely out of character, something that shocks everyone who knows her and shocks herself most of all. And in this breakdown, there is the possibility of breakthrough, because the breakdown is the psyche's way of saying, "You can no longer continue as you have been. Something must change. You must turn toward what you have denied. The symptoms are not the problem. They are the solution attempting to emerge. They are the shadow knocking at the door, demanding entry, refusing to be ignored any longer. But this turning toward the shadow is terrifying for the good one. It means acknowledging that they have been angry when they claimed they were not. It means admitting that they have resented the people they have been serving. It means recognizing that they have needs they have never expressed. It means seeing that they have been living according to an image rather than according to their true nature. And all of this threatens the very foundation of their identity. Who am I if I am not the good one? This is the question that arises. And it is a profound question because it forces the person to confront the fact that the good one is not who they are. It is a role they have been playing. It is a defense they have been using. It is a strategy they developed long ago to survive an environment that could not accept their full humanity. But they are not children anymore. They do not need this defense anymore, and yet they have become so identified with it that they cannot imagine existing without it. The process of individuation for the good one requires the dismantling of this false identity. It requires acknowledging the shadow, integrating the rejected parts, and discovering who they actually are beneath the role. This is not a gentle process. It is painful. It is disorienting. It feels like death, because in a sense, it is death. It is the death of the constructed self, the persona that has been mistaken for the true self. But it is also birth. It is the emergence of the authentic self, the self that contains both light and shadow, both goodness and not goodness, both strength and vulnerability. Let us speak now of the specific costs of being the good one, the hidden prices that are paid. The first cost is authenticity. The good one cannot be authentic because authenticity requires expressing the full range of human experience, including the parts that are not good. Authenticity means saying, "This is who I am, with all my flaws and contradictions and complexity." But the good one can only show the approved parts. They must hide everything else. And so they are never truly seen. They are never truly known. They relate to others from behind a mask, and they never experience the deep connection that comes from being fully oneself with another person. The second cost is vitality. The good one is often exhausted, depleted, running on empty. This is because they are constantly giving and never receiving, constantly performing and never resting, constantly meeting the needs of others while ignoring their own. The life force, the energy that should be available for creativity and joy and spontaneity, is channeled entirely into maintaining the role. There is nothing left for themselves. They become like a well that is constantly drawn from but never refilled. They wake up tired. They go through the day in a fog of exhaustion. They collapse at night only to lie awake worrying about what they need to do tomorrow. The third cost is resentment. Although the good one may not consciously acknowledge it, although they may genuinely believe they are happy to serve, beneath the surface there is resentment. There is anger at being taken for granted. There is frustration at having to suppress their own needs. There is bitterness at the unfairness of always giving while others take. This resentment poisons relationships. It creates distance. It leads to passive-aggressive behavior and emotional withdrawal. But because it is not acknowledged consciously, it cannot be addressed directly. It simply festers, contaminating every interaction. The fourth cost is loss of self. The good one does not know who they are apart from the role. If you ask them what they want, they cannot answer. If you ask them what they feel, they do not know. If you ask them what they need, they deflect to what others need. If you ask them what brings them joy, they struggle to think of anything. They have been so focused on external expectations for so long that they have lost contact with their own inner life. They have no relationship with themselves, and this creates a profound emptiness, a sense of living a life that belongs to someone else. The fifth cost is vulnerability to exploitation. Because the good one cannot set boundaries, because they cannot say no, because they feel responsible for the emotions and needs of everyone around them, they become targets for those who would take advantage. They attract narcissistic partners who demand endless care and give nothing in return. They attract demanding employers who pile on more work because they know it will get done. They attract friends who use them as emotional dumping grounds but are never available when the good one needs support. They attract people who see their goodness and mistake it for weakness, for something to be used rather than honored. And because the good one believes that their value lies in what they do for others, they accept this treatment. They believe this is what love looks like. They believe this is their purpose. The sixth cost is the eventual eruption of the shadow. As I have said, what is denied does not disappear. It accumulates, and eventually, it explodes. The good one who has been patient for decades suddenly rages at a minor inconvenience. The good one who has been responsible suddenly abandons all their duties. The good one who has been faithful suddenly has an affair. The good one who has been sober suddenly relapses. The good one who has been stable suddenly falls apart. These explosions are devastating because they come without warning, and they contradict everything the person believed about themselves. They destroy relationships. They destroy trust. They destroy the carefully constructed life that the good one has built. And they leave the person in crisis, wondering who they are and how they got here. Now, let us speak of how this pattern is maintained, what psychological mechanisms keep it in place. The primary mechanism is what we call reaction formation. This is a defense mechanism where we adopt a behavior or attitude that is the opposite of our true feelings. The good one feels anger but expresses excessive patience. They feel selfish desires but act in excessively self-sacrificing ways. They feel critical of others but express excessive acceptance. The reaction formation is so complete, so convincing, that even the person themselves believes it. They are not aware they are defending against something. They genuinely believe they are naturally patient, naturally selfless, naturally accepting. Another mechanism is denial. The good one simply does not see the parts of themselves that contradict the role. When they act passive-aggressively, they do not recognize it as aggression. When they feel resentful, they reframe it as something else, perhaps as concern or worry. When they are exhausted and depleted, they tell themselves they are fine. When people point out that they seem angry or sad or overwhelmed, they insist that everything is okay. The denial is automatic and unconscious. It protects the persona from being threatened by shadow material. A third mechanism is projection. The good one projects their own rejected qualities onto others. They see other people as selfish when they cannot acknowledge their own healthy selfishness. They see others as angry when they cannot acknowledge their own anger. They see others as irresponsible when they cannot acknowledge their own occasional desire to let things fall apart. They see others as demanding when they cannot acknowledge their own unmet needs. This projection allows them to engage with the shadow material indirectly through others while maintaining their own identification with goodness. A fourth mechanism is what we might call compulsive caretaking. The good one becomes so focused on taking care of others that they have no time or energy to attend to their own inner life. The constant busyness, the constant focus on external tasks and other people's needs serves as a distraction from the growing unease within. It keeps them from having to face the emptiness, the resentment, the anger, the sadness that has been accumulating. As long as they are busy being good, they can avoid the confrontation with themselves. As long as someone needs them, they do not have to face the question of who they are when no one needs them. A fifth mechanism is rationalization. The good one creates elaborate justifications for their behavior. They tell themselves that they are simply being kind, that they are simply being helpful, that they are simply doing what anyone would do. They tell themselves that their self-sacrifice is a choice, freely made, rather than a compulsion driven by fear. They tell themselves that they enjoy giving, that they do not mind having no time for themselves, that they do not need anything in return. The rationalizations sound reasonable. They may even be partially true, but they obscure the deeper truth, that the goodness is defensive, that it is maintaining a borderity, split in the psyche, that it is costing far more than they are willing to acknowledge. These mechanisms work together to maintain the false self, to keep the persona in place, to prevent the shadow from emerging into consciousness. And they work quite well for a time, sometimes for years. sometimes for decades. But they cannot work forever, because the psyche will not tolerate permanent division. The drive toward wholeness is stronger than the drive toward safety. And eventually, the psyche will create a crisis that forces the issue. Let me speak now of what integration looks like for the good one, how they might begin to reclaim the shadow and become whole. The first step is always acknowledgement. The good one must begin to see that they have been playing a role, that they have been identified with a false self, that there are parts of them that have been denied. This acknowledgement usually comes through some kind of crisis or breakdown, because the ego will not voluntarily give up its identification. Something must force the issue. But once the acknowledgement begins, once the person starts to see the pattern, the work of integration can begin. The second step is feeling. The good one must begin to allow themselves to feel what they have been suppressing. They must allow themselves to feel anger without immediately suppressing it or turning it into something acceptable. They must allow themselves to feel sadness without having to fix it or move past it quickly. They must allow themselves to feel desire, need, longing without shame or guilt. They must allow themselves to feel resentment without immediately rationalizing it away. This is terrifying because these feelings have been forbidden for so long, but feeling is essential. What is not felt remains unconscious and acts autonomously. The third step is expressing. The good one must begin to express what they have been keeping inside. This does not mean acting out destructively. It does not mean raging at everyone who has ever taken advantage of them. It means finding appropriate ways to communicate their feelings, their needs, their boundaries. It means learning to say no without elaborate justifications. It means learning to ask for what they want without apologizing. It means learning to express disagreement or frustration without believing that doing so makes them a bad person. This is incredibly difficult because it threatens all their relationships, which have been built on the assumption that they will always be accommodating. The fourth step is grieving. The good one must grieve what they have lost by living this way. They must grieve the years spent in service to others at the expense of themselves. They must grieve the authentic relationships they never had because they were always performing. They must grieve the life they might have lived if they had been free to be themselves. They must grieve the parts of themselves that were sacrificed, the spontaneity and joy and aliveness that were suppressed. This grief is profound and necessary. Without it, there can be no release, no letting go of the old pattern. The fifth step is reconstructing identity. The good one must discover who they are apart from the role. They must explore their own desires, their own values, their own preferences. They must learn to make choices based on what they actually want rather than on what they believe they should want. They must develop a relationship with themselves, learning to listen to their own inner voice rather than always attending to external expectations. This is a long process, often requiring years of introspection and experimentation. It requires patience and compassion with oneself because it feels like learning to walk for the first time. The sixth step is renegotiating relationships. The good one must communicate the changes they are making to the people in their life. Some relationships will adapt, some will not. Some people will welcome the more authentic version of the good one. They will be relieved to finally know the real person beneath the performance. Others will resist because they benefited from the old dynamic and do not want it to change. They will try to guilt the good one back into the old role. They will accuse them of being selfish or changing or not caring anymore. The good one must be prepared to lose relationships that cannot accommodate their authenticity. This is painful, but necessary. Relationships that require self-abandonment are not true relationships. Now, let me speak directly to those who recognize themselves in this description, those who have been the good one. You may be feeling defensive as you listen to this. You may be thinking, but being good is not wrong, serving others is not wrong, being selfless is not wrong. And you are right. These qualities, when they come from a place of genuine freedom and choice, are beautiful. But that is not what we are talking about here. We are talking about compulsive goodness, defensive goodness, goodness that is used to avoid facing the shadow, goodness that is performed rather than chosen. Ask yourself these questions honestly. Can you say no without guilt? Can you express anger without feeling that you are a bad person? Can you prioritize your own needs without believing you are selfish? Can you tolerate disappointing others? Can you allow yourself to be imperfect? Can you rest without feeling you should be doing something productive? Can you receive without immediately feeling you must give back? Can you ask for help without apologizing? If the answer to any of these questions is no, then you are not freely choosing goodness. You are compulsively performing it as a defense. The goal is not to stop being kind or caring or responsible. The goal is to reclaim the freedom to choose when and how you express these qualities. The goal is to be good when you genuinely want to be good, not because you are terrified of what will happen if you are not. The goal is to integrate the shadow so that you are a complete human being, not a one-dimensional performance of goodness. This integration will change you. It will change your relationships. It will change your life. And this is frightening. But consider the alternative. Consider continuing as you have been, denying yourself, suppressing your needs, performing the role until the shadow erupts in ways you cannot control. Consider the cost of never being truly known, never being truly authentic, never being truly alive. Is that preferable to the fear of change? The path of individuation requires courage. It requires the willingness to face what we have denied, to feel what we have suppressed, to become what we have refused to be. For the good one, it requires acknowledging that they are not only good, that they contain darkness as well as light, that they are human, and therefore flawed and complex and contradictory. This acknowledgement is not a fall from grace. It is a return to reality. It is a return to wholeness. As we near the end of this reflection, I want to speak about the possibility that lies on the other side of this integration. When the good one reclaims their shadow, when they integrate what they have denied, something remarkable happens. They do not become less kind or less caring. They become more genuinely kind and caring because their kindness is now a choice rather than a compulsion. They become more effective in their relationships because they are no longer performing and can actually be present. They become more vital, more alive, more authentic. They discover that they can be angry and still be loved. They discover that they can have needs and still be worthy. They discover that they can set boundaries and relationships actually improve rather than falling apart. They discover that their value does not depend on what they do for others, but on who they are as a complete human being. They discover that they are more than the role they have been playing. They discover that authentic connection is possible, that being truly seen is worth the risk of not being universally approved of. This is not an easy journey. It is perhaps one of the most difficult psychological journeys a person can undertake, because it requires dismantling the very identity that has provided safety and meaning for most of their life. But it is necessary. It is the only way to live a genuine life. It is the only way to escape the hidden costs of being the good one. If this exploration has resonated with you, if you recognize yourself in this pattern, I invite you to support this work by liking this video and subscribing to Psyche and Meaning. This channel exists for those who are willing to examine themselves honestly, who are willing to face the shadow, who understand that depth and meaning require confronting what we have denied. Your engagement helps this content reach others who are ready for this confrontation. And so we return to the beginning. The good one, the one who never causes trouble, who always meets expectations, who sacrifices themselves for others, is paying a hidden cost. They are sacrificing their authenticity, their vitality, their wholeness. They are living a half-life, performing a role, denying themselves. And the shadow they create through this denial grows larger and more dangerous until it can no longer be contained. The invitation is to stop performing, to stop defending, to stop pretending, to acknowledge what has been denied, to feel what has been suppressed, to reclaim what has been rejected, to become whole rather than merely good. This is the work of individuation. This is the path to genuine selfhood. This is the only way to live a life that is truly your own, rather than a life that belongs to the image you have been maintaining. The good one must die so that the true self can be born. And this death, though frightening, is also liberation. The cost of being the good one is too high. It is time to pay it no longer.